Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm John Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vitor.
On the pod today, Donald Trump's impeachment trial begins today, and Mitch McConnell wants it to last about 10 minutes. We're also going to talk about a very busy weekend on the 2020 campaign trail, which included the New York Times surprise endorsement of not one but two presidential candidates. And later in the pod, you'll hear Tommy's interview with Chris Liddell Westefeld, a former colleague of ours who's just published an oral history of Obama's 2008 campaign. Couple quick housekeeping notes. Lovett, how was the show this weekend?
Action-packed.
Action-packed.
Love it or leave it. We had presidential candidate Deval Patrick. He was a very good sport during Queen for a Day, though I do think didn't understand where or why he was doing it, where he was or why he was doing it.
Can't blame him.
Kara Swisher on Facebook, Mitra Juhari, and Damon Young were there. Both really an all-star show. Check it out.
Show. Also, episodes 3 and 4 of The Wilderness are out now. In the Southwest episode, we talk about how Sunbelt suburbs are turning blue, and I sit down with some Romney Clinton voters. In the Southeast episode, we talk about expanding the electorate with Stacey Abrams, and I talked to some voters who stayed home or voted third party in 2016. Please subscribe and check it out at thewilderness.podcast.com. Check it out. Finally, Pod Save America and Love It or Leave It are going on tour. See where we're heading at crooked.com/events. We also just added a new Santa Barbara show on April 17th. Pre-sale tickets are available starting Wednesday. Again, check it out at crooked.com/events. We would love to see you on the road. All right, here we go. The third impeachment trial in our country's history begins today. Over the weekend, the House of Representatives laid out their case against Donald Trump, arguing that his, quote, continued willingness to corrupt free and fair elections, betray our national security, and subvert the constitutional separation of powers makes the president, quote, an immediate threat to the nation and the rule of law. Not mincing words, guys. Trump's lawyers have decided not to contest the basic facts of the case, but instead argue that extorting Ukraine until they announced a phony investigation into Joe Biden wasn't impeachable. It was just a foreign policy decision. And being the first president in history to obstruct an entire impeachment inquiry wasn't impeachable. It was just executive privilege. So basically, they've done a full Nixon here. When the president does it, it's not illegal. It seems like we've come a long way from the no quid pro quo days. Why do you think they landed on this argument?
I mean, they're just fighting it out in the court of public opinion, and their entire goal, the Trump team's goal, is to prevent any Republican senators from defecting. So they know they have no argument on the facts. We all read the transcript where he tries to extort the Ukrainian government for dirt on Joe Biden in exchange for withholding military aid and other support. They just need to keep a bunch of Republicans scared of a primary.
Yeah. What do you think about it?
I think two things. One, I think they feel like they're on safer ground talking about executive power than they are on the facts of the case, that it's very hard to dispute the record. And executive privilege is a place where a lot of Republicans will feel comfortable seeking kind of readout from the facts, which are so damning. And then on top of that, I think they're kind of trying to talk to John Bolton a little bit. And otherwise, I think they're just not really sure what to be saying. They have a very hard... A sophisticated legal argument on behalf of Donald Trump is an incredibly difficult thing to make. That is why, to this day, we have never actually heard one.
Yeah, if they can get into the weeds on what does executive privilege mean? What is an impeachable offense? Let's get Alan fucking Dershowitz up here talking about the Constitution. Let's bore some people, right? They're also trying to protect themselves in case we do hear from John Bolton. We do hear new explosive evidence, because whatever sort of explosive testimony and evidence we may hear in the next couple of weeks, they're just going to say, yeah, well, that may be true, but the president still gets to do whatever he wants to do. Their argument is basically that the president can't be impeached for abusing his office.
Yeah, it's literally their argument. I mean, they want to exploit the confusion over what an impeachable offense is.
Yeah.
They're trying to argue that it has to involve a violation of criminal law. That is not true. That's absurd. While there is minimal language about impeachment in the Constitution itself, there's discussion among the founders as it was being developed that shows their clear intent to cover abuses of power. And our statutes are based in English law that's also clear about that intent. So no experts are actually confused about whether an abuse of power is an impeachable event. It clearly is. In fact, what's the creep who always Skypes on Fox and defends sex offenders?
Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz himself.
Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer?
In the 90s, Jeff's friend,
Jeff's friend.
Epstein's buddy, in the 90s during the Clinton impeachment, took the opposite position that he's taking today on whether abuse of power was impeachable.
Two quick points. One, It also is just worth noting that one of these talking points has gone away now that the GAO has said that it was illegal for the president to withhold the aid to Ukraine. That's one. And two, I don't believe it is fair that Mitch McConnell is not accounting for the amount of time it takes to clear the line of sludge and slime that Alan Dershowitz leaves behind himself when he moves through a room. And I just think it's like really unfair to the Democrats who have to speak after him that they're going to probably have to just kind of wade through that layer of disgusting sleaze that he puts behind himself.
Their response to the government accountability their response to the Government Accountability Office, which is Congress's nonpartisan watchdog agency, is truly amazing because basically the response is just too late.
Right.
Nope. The GAO should have made that determination that it was illegal while the House impeachment hearings were going on. Now that they didn't, it's too late. We got away with it.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
Let's talk about the rules of the trial. Mitch McConnell says, let's talk about the rules of the trial. Originally, Mitch McConnell said that the House's lawyers and Trump's lawyers had 24 hours over 2 days to present their opening arguments beginning Wednesday afternoon. After that, senators may question the parties for a period of time not to exceed 16 hours, and once the questioning has ended, both sides will each have 2 hours to make further arguments. Only then will the Senate be allowed to vote on whether to subpoena witnesses, new evidence, or even admit the existing evidence into the public record. These rules are, of course, very different than the rules from the Clinton impeachment trial, which means that Mitch McConnell lied to us, which, never thought I'd see the day.
Just fell over.
I'm
getting back up.
Then something happened just this morning. So this led to a big public outcry. And lo and behold, an hour ago, Mitch McConnell changed his mind. Prosecution and defense will now get 3 days each instead of 2. And the House evidence will automatically be entered into trial. So fairly small concessions here. It's not like Mitch McConnell had this generous change of heart. Like, clearly he believed he didn't have 51 votes for those rules and was forced to do it because everyone... because there was such a public outcry, which leads me to my question. Let's start with what the Democrats' job is here and what the Democrats can realistically hope to achieve throughout this trial, knowing that there is almost zero chance that this will end in a conviction. What do you think, Lovett?
So I think, first of all, it's just worth praising Pelosi for holding up the articles because I remember the original draft of the rules said that if you don't get your impeachment in 30 minutes is free. But that said, I do see a lot of there's a lot of people in the weeds of what these rules mean. And, are they going to vote for witnesses or there will first be a procedural vote to determine whether or not there will be a vote on witnesses and what have you. I think it's just worth remembering that all the procedural hurdles aside, it can make life easy. Those rules can make life a little bit easier, a little bit harder for the kind of moderates is the wrong word, the kind of Republicans that would vote for witnesses, your Susan Collinses, your Mitt Romneys.
We can call them gettable.
The gettables.
Yeah. Since moderate's not a word we can use for any of them, but we can call them gettable.
The gettables.
Yeah.
McConnell can basically make if he keeps them on his side on the no witnesses, no evidence trial theory, then he can make that a little bit easier for them with some of these procedural motions. But ultimately, what we were talking about is whether or not 4 people will decide to vote in favor of having witnesses and evidence at this trial, and I think everything should be focused on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some rules that I would have liked to have seen that didn't make it, no headbutts, no eye gouging, no groin stuff. I think that's a big one. But I mean, the comparison to the Clinton impeachment...
Klobuchar is that's my fucking bread and butter.
The comparison to the Clinton impeachment is so frustratingly stupid because in 1999 in that trial, depositions had been taken for years as part of a grand jury investigation that were videotaped, publicly released, transcripts of which were publicly released, and portions of the interviews were even shown on TV on the Senate floor. So the fact that we're even debating whether to allow fact witnesses like John Bolton to testify shows you how different this actually is. And I do think that has to be a big part of the Democratic case is that this is an obstruction effort.
Yeah. I think broadly, realistic goals for the Democrats are, number one, let's just get the full truth out so we all know exactly what happened, right? And we know most of what happened at this point, but we still need Bolton and some other documents, right? Number two, remind the American people of the president's crimes and why they matter to them.
Yeah.
I think we have to continue so that this resonates with people who are watching. Why is it bad for you that the president has tried to cheat in another election? And then I think it would be good for the Democrats to force Trump to deliver his State of the Union address while he's standing trial for impeachment, as opposed to while he's just been acquitted, which clearly Mitch McConnell's trying to rush this trial so that Trump can give a State of the Union and boast of his the fact that he was just acquitted. So we should try to drag it out as long as possible. And then the final one is a very political goal. Like, we should expose the Republican senators who were up in 2020 as partisan hacks with no mind of their own, who are going to do anything Trump tells them to, even cover up his crimes. And that's it. And that's what you were just saying this, Lovett, about getting those 4 votes. Like, Susan Collins is now the most unpopular senator in the country.
Oops.
Martha McSally's approval ratings have gone in the tank. Cory Gardner's probably the first Republican senator to go in 2020. These Republican senators are incredibly vulnerable, and the only way that these Republican senators, including Tom Tillis, maybe Joni Ernst, McSally certainly in Arizona, the only way they're going to win their races, what their campaign plan is to show that they are independent voices, that they are not tied to Donald Trump, that they have their mind of their own. And this impeachment trial is an opportunity for Democrats to say, and all the outside groups, everyone running ads, everyone else, to say, no, these people don't have a mind of their own. They are not bipartisan. They are not independent. They are covering up anything Donald Trump tells them to cover up. I think that's a huge goal for this trial.
Yeah. Well, Cory Gardner's living in a secret chamber at the Denver airport. So
that was a great New York Times story.
Hopefully they can find him. I have to say, on this pressuring these Senate Republicans point, I think that we as a party are utterly failing. There are 11 impeachment ads on TV right now. All of them are paid for by Republicans to support Republicans. There's no outside game putting money on TV to pressure these guys. It's all being done by the media. And as we've seen, some of these Republicans want to jujitsu that by saying to a CNN reporter like Martha McSally did, you're a hack, and then creating a website and selling T-shirts where you show that you're tough and, against the media to get MAGA money. So, we got to step up our game.
And I thought it was welcome news this morning that I saw Michael Bloomberg is going to be switching his ads from every other issue that he's talking about right now to impeachment, which is good because he's running more ads than anyone else. But everyone else needs to step up. And what's happening in some of these organizations. They're saying people don't care about impeachment as much as they care about healthcare, so we want to focus all of our firepower on healthcare. I get that. I get there's limited resources, but hey, we'll all chip in for the next couple of weeks just to take a pause and run ads on impeachment to make sure that at the end of this, we have a narrative that is, Democrats really forced a lot of these Republican senators into an uncomfortable political position, because that narrative is going to help us win in 2020. So it is important to do now.
Yeah, I also the good news is that despite the fact that we're at this financial disadvantage right now, the polls are getting stronger and stronger. There's now a majority in favor of not just impeachment, but impeachment and removal. The numbers are really heartening. And, I think we all live in this world of what rules apply to Trump, what rules don't. Is there still political gravity? And I think sometimes we all fall for that a bit. Certainly the media falls for that, different parts of the media anyway. And it's just worth remembering whether it's taking out Soleimani or it's polls on impeachment, your common sense is not invalidated by the way regular people are watching this unfold. So that I think is at least just a tiny bit of hope in that.
Agreed.
Yeah. So in order for Democrats to achieve any of these goals, it does seem like we'll need a longer trial that allows new witnesses and new evidence. Already since the House impeached Trump, we got new emails that tie Trump to withholding the aid. Giuliani goon Lev Parnas telling Rachel Maddow that Trump is guilty. We got the GAO saying that Trump broke the law, and John Bolton saying he'll answer a Senate subpoena. What can Democrats say or do to win the fight to make all of this part of the trial? Axios reports that Trump officials feel bullish about convincing Republican senators to buy their argument against new witnesses, and that argument is that it could compromise national security.
That's an utter horseshit argument. I mean, they're trying to say that John Bolton can't testify first for executive privilege reasons, and there's an argument to be made there, right? There is executive privilege that exists for all presidents. This is an extreme situation, an impeachment trial. But the notion that Bolton couldn't find a way to talk about the conversations with Ukraine after Trump declassified the transcript of the phone call is ridiculous. And it's just an abuse of the classification system. Again, like when they tried to put it on the code word server to hide the facts from the American people.
It's also,
I don't think that'll fly.
On the executive privilege thing, too, it's one thing to claim that there are certain aspects of what John Bolton talked directly with Donald Trump about that might fall under executive privilege. Now, I think lawyers would argue that that doesn't protect the president from committing crimes.
Yep.
But also, that certainly shouldn't mean that, regardless of your view on executive privilege, that that's a blanket rule that John Bolton can't testify at all.
He's telling his book publisher.
It's ridiculous.
How about us?
It's not like a lawyer could argue that executive privilege doesn't allow you to commit crimes.
Right.
It's not the founders didn't say, yeah, no, the House has the right to impeach, and we're going to have this impeachment thing, and we're going to make sure that the president can be impeached. Oh, but we forgot he can also just use his get out of jail free card, which is executive privilege. Why didn't we think of that? Like, what? That's not the meaning of fucking executive privilege, you assholes. It's crazy that Axios just took that spin and was like, oh, they're very bullish about it. They're very excited. Pat Cipollone is proud that he's come up with this argument about national security. Like,
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Also, I know that like Lev Parnas looks like a morally flexible giant baby that has shady associations, and like maybe we should be cautious about believing everything he says. But corrupt people tend to hire other corrupt people to do their crimes. So, I'd like to hear what he has to say. I think we should push for it. It was pretty explosive Rachel Maddow interviews.
Yeah, I'm totally open.
Investigate.
I'm totally open to the possibility that Lev Parnas may have not told the entire truth to Rachel Maddow. That's certainly a possibility I'm willing to entertain. That said, if everything he said was made up, Lev Parnas is the greatest screenwriter in the history of the world.
And actor. Also,
he's fucking Phoebe Waller-Bridge over there.
Also,
she broke the fourth wall.
They already corroborated some of it with documents, right?
Yes.
Schiff has been making this point that everyone's so focused on witnesses and there hasn't been enough focus on documents, but they've been withholding all these documents. And I do think in the case of Parnas, like, we don't have to believe witnesses or not if there's evidence, and there's plenty of evidence that the White House is holding back, namely all of it.
There's a letter from Rudy Giuliani where he says, hey, I'm operating on behalf of the President of the United States and all my actions.
Yeah,
usually I kind of buy that one.
Most often documents don't lie.
They had to take Yovanovitch out of Ukraine because they were worried about her safety, and then text with Lev Parnas showing up being like, I'm following her around. Here's the kind of pizza she likes.
Here's her address in Ukrainian.
I think also, and Lovett, you just mentioned this about when you're talking about public opinion, the Democrats are on incredibly strong ground here, talking not just about how the public narrowly approves of impeaching Donald Trump, but overwhelmingly approves of new evidence and witnesses. In the CNN poll that was just released on Monday, 69% of respondents say that the upcoming trial should feature testimony from new witnesses who did not testify in the House impeachment inquiry. If you just ask Republicans, 48% say they want new witnesses, while 44% say they do not. Democrats should be screaming this from the rooftops every single day of this trial. And look, I know that, no one has to like bet on Mitt Romney or Susan Collins or anyone being like courageous and keeping their word. But Mitt Romney's on the record now saying like, yeah, I'm going along with these rules now, but I'm going to vote for new witnesses, And so, yeah, he can break his promise, but these people are going out on a limb to put themselves on the record, not saying maybe I'll think about it. Like, yeah, I want new witnesses. So we just got to keep the pressure up. And I think like, the danger and what McConnell is betting on here is that we go through 2 weeks of this, everyone's bored to death by all the details, and then when it comes time to vote whether we should have new witnesses and documents, everyone's like, well, I'm not paying attention. That's it. Forget it. Yeah. And we just have to do everything we can to keep the pressure up until then.
And look, he started, obviously he's been lying about adopting the Clinton rules. They're not doing the Clinton rules. But even still, the Clinton rules were not around obstruction of Congress, which denied the House a ton of access to important information and building their record. And it's also worth remembering that by the time the Clinton impeachment trial, this was a situation in which a lot of Republicans wanted to be done with it, too. It's sort of a different circumstance. And then just one other thing I'll just throw out there, Phoebe Perfect Collar Bridge, Phoebe Waller Bulge.
What?
I'm trying to come up with a Lev Parnas Phoebe Waller, but trying to find a joke in it.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, no, I think you
Perfect
got
Collar Bridge. Because like perfect call.
Anyway,
send comments.
Call Congress, please. Tommy's wearing the Call Congress sweatshirt right now.
202-224-3121.
That's very helpful to be able to say this when it's not in my notes. You just have it on.
Phoebe Collar Congress Bridge.
So again, the senators you really want to target: Susan Collins, Mitt Romney, Lisa Murkowski, Lamar Alexander has seemed like he might do it too, and then some of the other vulnerable 2020 senators: Cory Gardner, Martha McSally, Tom Tillis, Joni Ernst. If you're in one of those states, they're one of your senators. Light up the phones. All right. We're now less than 2 weeks from caucus day in Iowa. and no one has any fucking clue what's going to happen.
I really don't.
The race is probably more unsettled and unpredictable than ever. There was another Iowa poll over the weekend from David Binder. He's an Obama pollster who has certainly done a great job of polling Iowa in the past. That poll shows Joe Biden in the lead with 24%, obviously different than the Des Moines Register poll. So no one knows. There's still not been enough polling in Iowa. Meanwhile, the race is getting a bit more aggressive. The Biden and Sanders campaigns got into it over the former vice president's record on Social Security and accusations of corruption. And even Hillary Clinton has weighed in because 2016 will live forever. Let's start with the Social Security debate. Bernie told the Washington Post that Biden has been open to making cuts to the program in the past. Why do you guys think Bernie is picking this particular issue to go after Biden on, and do you think it's a fair hit?
I think he's doing it for the same. I think that what we saw in the last debate is one of the only fiery moments in that debate was Bernie Sanders attacking Joe Biden's record on Iraq. And I think this is part of that same argument, which is if so much of Biden's candidacy rests on stability and experience and wisdom and judgment based on a lifetime in politics, Bernie is systematically going through that record and saying, what has that wisdom gotten us? Right? If he's open to this if this is where he's been over the course of his career, and maybe he's in a better place now, why should you trust him to not be too moderate, too centrist, too conciliatory with Republicans when that's the tack he's taken throughout his career? Now, there's been this debate about whether you can technically say Joe Biden has been for cuts and how Democrats have over the years described not increasing Social Security as a cut. I actually don't think it's that. Litigating that debate, I think, is less important than recognizing that there is a vulnerability in the more moderate positions Joe Biden has taken over the course of a long career. But Joe Biden can clearly respond to that and saying, look at where I am now. And where I am now does not comport with the version of my positions that Bernie Sanders is trying to paint.
Yeah, and also, I imagine this is an incredibly salient issue among older Iowa voters who you assume will caucus and desperately want to caucus for you and come to your corner, and historically has been a huge driver of voting patterns in this country.
Yeah, I was going to say two groups of voters that Joe Biden is doing very well with and Bernie Sanders is not doing as well with: older voters and African Americans, and particularly older African Americans, all of whom rely on Social Security, especially. And so I think Bernie is sort of picking these issues that might start peeling away some of Biden's core constituencies. And as to the fairness of the hit, you're right. I mean, you can look back and, there's clips of Joe Biden in the 80s and 90s talking about freezing Social Security or balanced budget amendments and all that kind of stuff.
Raising the cap.
Raising the cap, means testing, right? So all this I think it's completely fair to look at someone's record. Yeah. There was this whole, fight over the weekend that honestly was hard to follow even for me about doctored videos and not doctored videos, and was Joe Biden being sarcastic in 2018 when he's talking about Paul Ryan or not. I don't even want to get into it now because it was all sort of silly. I think the main point is Joe Biden has a record on Social Security, like you said. It's fair to go back and look through the record of what he said. Where he is now is for expanding Social Security slightly. So that's where Joe Biden is now. But, it's fair to look at someone's record, I think.
Yeah, I also it's interesting, too, because this is something that happened to Hillary Clinton as well, which is, Joe Biden is a kind of mainstream consensus Democratic Party figure. And a lot of times what he's paying for is having the mainstream consensus view at a time in which Democrats just had a different way of thinking about budget cuts, Social Security, trying to appeal to people with balanced budgets. I mean, politics has changed over the 45 or 75 years Joe Biden has been in politics.
Well, and also, look, we should say that in the middle of the budget negotiations, we were trying to avoid, the debt ceiling and economic collapse, thanks to John Boehner and the Republicans in 2011. There was one proposal that had been reported on that to get a big deal, we were going to make some minor changes to Social Security that would have, reduced benefits somewhat. And it never went through because the Republicans obviously never agreed on anything. But Joe Biden's getting shit for that, too, because Obama was there for that.
Yeah.
And I think that was bad looking back on it.
Yeah, and we all should just be honest that the next time a Democrat is sitting in the Oval Office, Republicans are going to suddenly care We should just be honest. The next time a Democrat is sitting in the Oval Office, Republicans are going to suddenly pretend to care about the $23 trillion deficit, and they will act like it is not almost entirely caused by cutting taxes for the richest people on the fucking planet, and will try to gut Social Security again. And so I think what the Bernie people are trying to signal is that he will be uncompromising on that issue and hasn't been in the past. And I think that's a fair tack to take.
And I hope other Democrats say the same thing who are running too. Like, it should not be led down the rabbit hole that we were led down in 2011.
Yeah.
So things did cool off a bit on Monday night when Bernie apologized to Biden for an op-ed that one of his surrogates, Zephyr Teachout, had written accusing Biden of having a corruption problem. Sanders said, quote, "It's absolutely not my view that Joe is corrupt in any way." He also said, quote, "I appeal to my supporters, please engage in civil discourse, and I would appeal to everybody, have a debate on the issues. We can disagree with each other without being disagreeable, without being hateful." I thought this was very notable.
Yeah,
that Bernie said that.
This is the point of the campaign where it's starting to get nasty, but it's not really nasty yet. And I think often the staffers are a lot more pissed off and eager to take shots at the rivals than the candidates themselves. And so I think, we certainly should debate Joe Biden's position on Social Security. I do think the Paul Ryan video was misleadingly edited at best. I think it was an overreach probably to send out an op-ed that called Biden corrupt. I think, I would probably not want to be as full-throated with my attacks before Iowa if I were them. And it seems like Bernie is in the same boat as me when it comes to strategic choices.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it's good for Bernie. I'm glad he
good
said
for Bernie.
that.
I should have started that.
I think there's also, like you said, there's a political benefit to doing that too, and that Bernie and Biden share a lot of supporters, or at least people are trying to make up their mind between the two. The plurality of people who support Biden, their second choice is Bernie right now.
I wonder what the conversations are like sort of behind the scenes on, say, putting out that op-ed, because it is true that there's sort of these two conflicting things. There's three things. One is to Tommy's point about the desire to not seem like you're attacking a Democrat. But then there are these two competing concerns, which is, on the one hand, nobody wants to see Democrats in the primary add fuel to the Republican fire around Hunter Biden and the sort of attacks against Joe Biden and the unfair way in which he's been maligned by Trump. At the same time, I think when the cameras are off and when the tweets are going into the draft folder, say, I think everybody's worried, you know what? He does have a problem. Now, I think it's wrong to call it a corruption problem, but what's happening in the impeachment trial is a huge liability for Joe Biden, and I think everybody recognized that, and it's a difficult situation in which you don't want to accede to Republican sleaze around Joe Biden, while also recognizing that A, there is something corruptish about Hunter Biden's job, and B, it will be a political problem for Joe Biden. That's just a fact.
But that is nothing. The op-ed didn't say any of that. Didn't say anything about Hunter Biden. It was just a bunch of. And here's the thing, in the op-ed, right? She talks about a bunch of different issues, where Biden has received money here. It's actually an op-ed about policies he's taken, policy positions he's taken, which is fine. It's the use of the word corruption. That's
exactly
the real problem here. I think the test is, if you're going to say something about one of the Democratic candidates, can you imagine saying that same thing if that candidate is the nominee and still say you support them, right? So if Joe Biden wins the nomination, Bernie Sanders can say, I did disagree with Joe Biden's record on Social Security in the past, but right now I think he's going to be a great nominee. And that's a fair thing to say. It's harder to say, I do think Joe Biden has a corruption problem, but I'm happy he's the nominee.
Yeah,
you can't. You just have to imagine the future and what you're going to be saying when that person is the nominee, and that goes for what you say about Bernie as well.
I'm not in favor of kid glove primaries by any means.
No,
but I think that policy positions should be vetted, and I think, frankly, if there's opposition research about a candidate that might come out in the general election, it should come out in the primary. That benefits everyone in the long run. Yeah. But you're right. When you were just sort of asserting someone is corrupt, it's a lot harder to defend, and it's likely to turn off people.
Yeah, and I do think sometimes people use that as a cudgel. And you're not saying that, but I think people do use that. It's just there's a difference between saying don't attack each other, do kid gloves, don't say anything that could possibly be used in an ad, which means not having real hard debates.
I'm not for civility politics. I'm for keeping it relatively honest. Yeah. I'm for smart politics, which is not being an asshole generally. And that's, I think, something that a lot of supporters of various candidates haven't necessarily learned.
Yeah, but it's an interesting problem, right? Because it's so clear that there is the desire to get some of these questions about Joe Biden into the bloodstream without seeming as though you are making it impossible for him to win in the general.
Yeah, I'm just going to go with Bernie. Have a debate on the issues. Engage in civil discourse. There you go. So, of course, so that happens, and then you're like, oh, great, everything's cooling down. Biden, Bernie, we're back on the issues, great. And then Hillary Clinton pops up this morning in a Hollywood Reporter interview where she wouldn't commit to endorsing Bernie if he wins the nomination. In a new documentary about herself on Hulu, which will be out in early March, she says, quote, nobody likes him. He got nothing done in the Senate. He was a career politician. What's going on there? What do we think? I mean, look, I'll just start since I did not tweet about it this morning. But I have a lot of thoughts. If Hillary Clinton has every right to say whatever she wants to about Bernie if she doesn't like him. She does not have to support him in the primary. She can tell other people not to support him in the primary if she wants. She's totally within her rights to do that. Absolutely. But every party leader, every person with influence who is a progressive, who is a Democrat in this country has an obligation to say that they will support the Democratic nominee, whoever that person is. That goes for Bernie people. That goes for Biden people, Warren people, everyone.
And you know what? If that's not your view, if your view is that you won't support Bernie Sanders in the general, then you can say that, but you will be attacked for taking an incredibly immoral and wrong-headed position. And I have a feeling that, even as we're recording this on Tuesday morning, I have a feeling this will be clarified at some point soon by Hillary Clinton. But that said, I think sometimes
if she made a mistake, she made a mistake, and that's fine. Everyone makes mistakes. But let's just admit that it was a mistake to say that.
Yeah, and it's also not that hard to clarify. If Bernie's the nominee, I'll support him.
That's it.
Easy
thing to say.
I do think sometimes that the stakes in this election are so high, it makes it harder to see them. That the sheer cataclysm of re-electing someone like Donald Trump is so hard to imagine that it leads people to not truly accept the stakes in the primary too. And I do see some of that, and that's part of Twitter, and that's part of these comments and how people respond to these comments. And this is the last period before people start voting. And right now, we were just saying we don't know who the nominee is going to be. The vast majority of people who vote in the Democratic primary are likely not to vote for the person who's the nominee. And I see it in my mentions of people who say they don't like Bernie. I see it of people who say they can't see themselves canvassing for anyone who's not Bernie or Warren, right? I see both sides of it. And I think the one thing that there's one thing that we can tell ourselves now before we know who the nominee is to say to ourselves, what can I imagine doing in the general for the person I'm going to vote for? And can I pledge before I cast that vote that I will do the exact same amount, no matter who wins?
Just the question was so clear. If he gets the nomination, will you endorse and campaign for him? And the answer has to be yes. And maybe the most charitable explanation is that maybe she wants to hold back some leverage to extract some sort of promise or something. I think that's selfish. And to the people online, there's some defenders of hers who are online, who are my friends, who are saying have some faith in her for once, give her a break. I'm like, I did not develop a 4-part documentary about Hillary Clinton. She did. And then she did this Hollywood Reporter interview about it. And clearly the timing for the release of all of this was designed to drop in the middle of the primary because it would get a lot of attention. And what it's doing right now is exacerbating all the challenges and rifts from 2016 at a time when I think all of us know that maybe the most important thing we could do as a party is come together to win. And so I understand deeply the value of a united Democratic Party that tries to heal these wounds. I don't get who this is helping besides Hillary Clinton. And I think that's shitty. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And I'm so sick of being browbeaten for expressing what I think is a fairly obvious opinion about politicians don't deserve our benefit of the doubt. They deserve us to say what we really think and hopefully get them to do the right thing.
She is a brilliant human being who is politically shrewd and knows exactly what she was doing in that question. Let's not pretend it was it's just, come on. Look, but the reason that I wanted to talk about this is not because I think it's the biggest deal in the world, but because of exactly what you were just saying, Lovett, which is there's a moment now before the voting has started where everyone can just say, get in if you are a Bernie supporter, just imagine knocking on those doors for Joe Biden, because you got to do it. If you're a Joe Biden supporter, imagine knocking on those doors for Bernie Sanders. Imagine knocking on those doors for Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth. Well, everyone likes Elizabeth. A lot of people like Elizabeth Warren, but knock on those doors for Elizabeth. Amy Klobuchar. All of them.
But leaders of the party need to start saying today that that's what they're going to do, because thousands and thousands, if not millions of people will take their lead from them. And when people would say, oh, I won't support Mayor Pete because he's too moderate or he's McKinsey, that is bullshit. All of us need to step up and do whatever we can to beat Donald Trump. And it's like insane to me that needs to be restated.
Yeah, and look, and there's, like you said, the party leaders is the important thing here, because, there's all kinds of voters out there who really don't necessarily see the difference between if their candidate doesn't win, they'll say, oh, maybe I will vote for Donald Trump, or maybe I'll stay home. There's plenty of people like that out there, but that's them. It's on us, people who are in positions of influence, to set an example for everyone else.
And I'd also just say, it's clear from that interview that these feelings are raw and they are personal.
And I get that.
And that makes it all the more,
Hillary.
that makes the kind of opportunity to demonstrate leadership so much more evident. Like how powerful it would be for Hillary Clinton to stand up there and say, Bernie Sanders and I have our differences.
He hasn't been my favorite person. She can make a joke.
Say that, she could just say, if I will support and do everything I can for the nominee, even if it's my least favorite senator from Vermont. It's so easy.
Especially when the context for a lot of the frustration and the rift between the Bernie and Hillary side is a feeling among Hillary people that he did not do enough for her early enough to get his supporters to lay off her supporters, bring them together, and turn them out. It's like, we can't be hypocritical here.
And I'm kind of glad we're doing this now too, because I do think that
once there's a vote winner, then it's going to be
because look, we get, it's so funny. We were talking about this, that we hear it, I don't like those Pod Save America guys. They're in the tank for Pete. They're too nice to Bernie. They're too nice to Warren. Whatever it is.
I'm a Tulsi stan.
Whatever it is. And it's I know that once the nominee is chosen,
I'm here for
the people calling for unity are going to be attacked as being for unity because their candidate won. But we are sitting here at a moment where I genuinely believe that if you told me Bernie Sanders was the nominee, I can totally see that happening just as likely as I can see it being Biden. You can see Warren getting it. You can see Pete getting it. You can see
that's why it's
Klobuchar from downtown.
It's good doing this now when the race is so unpredictable and we have no idea who's going to win. One more thing before we get into it. The person with the most delegates should win the nomination.
Yeah.
It's a race for delegates just before we get into that spin. Because that's going to be a whole bunch of spin. Oh, but I got more here, and I won this state, and I won these kinds of states. We all went through this in 07 and 08. Everyone had their spin about why they were the big winner. It's a race for delegates. The person with the most delegates at the convention should be the nominee, barring something catastrophic.
Yeah. Good luck with that pitch on Iowa caucus night when there's 40 different data sets out there.
That's partly why I said it.
By the way, guys, so I'm going back to Iowa tomorrow, Wednesday.
Oh, you're going tomorrow? Wow.
Yeah. And I've been reaching out to all these campaigns, just checking in, see who's got events going on. They're all well, we think we might get in Friday night after impeachment, but there's 4 different snowstorms barreling down on the state. I mean, it is so unbelievably unpredictable. I mean, I'm a Des Moines Register and Seltzer poll stan, right? And I still feel like that sample is the biggest, and she's probably the best pollster in the state. But the fact that these numbers are all over the place, the fact that no one knows who's going to turn out. I mean, even the Register folks think that we're talking a third of the electorate will be new voters this time. No one has any idea.
I mean, look, add to that the fact that now Buttigieg and Biden are going to be roaming around Iowa alone.
Well, I wonder if they'll go together. Buddy comedy.
I am an Seltzer stan as well. What I would do is I wish everyone else could just pull their money together and pay Ann Seltzer and the Des Moines Register to conduct polls every week, because I do.
Yes, Ann.
I believe. I believe that's good. I believe that poll. But I don't know what the trend has been. These things move around so fast that if she polled again today, she could find what Binder found. I don't know. And we just don't know.
Binder's a great pollster. I was surprised that his Bernie number has been so low over time. Feels like that doesn't match the national trend either.
One thing that Binder nailed back in 08 was that there would be this larger caucus universe for Barack Obama that most people had missed, except for Ann Seltzer. Yeah. So her and Binder were on the same page then. All right, finally, over the weekend, a puff of white smoke emerged from the New York Times building in Manhattan, letting the world know that the editorial board had made not one but 2 endorsements in the Democratic primary, Amy Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren. The endorsement read as follows: The radical and the realist models warrant serious consideration. If they
so
were
angry.
I know, I'm so angry. If they were, I was screaming in our house watching the special.
Nerd.
Yeah.
Emily was, I know, I'm such a nerd. Emily was in the bedroom like, what the fuck are you doing? All right, so if there was ever a time to be open to new ideas, it is now. If there were ever a time to seek stability, now is it. That's why we're endorsing the most effective advocates for each approach. There will be those dissatisfied that this page is not throwing its weight behind a single candidate.
Everyone.
Favoring centrists or progressives. But it's a fight the party itself has been itching to have since Mrs. Clinton's defeat in 2016. Ms. Klobuchar and Ms. Warren right now are the Democrats best equipped to lead that debate. May the best woman win. All right, let's start with...
I feel like we should do process and substance.
Exactly. Oh, I was going to say, what do you guys think of their reasoning for picking two candidates? And then we can talk about their reasoning for picking these two candidates.
So let me start here with something charitable. We have some experience with how hard it is to create a new TV show, especially off of an existing thing, right? We had Pod Save America on HBO. It was a challenging, painful process. I give them credit for trying to be innovative and try new things with the weekly show that I have not watched. That said... building up like an editorial endorsement process in this silly, like performative reality TV show way, sure, it can make it more transparent, but it also heightens it. And it was just like, it seemed ridiculous online at the time. And that ridiculous sentiment, I think, gets overwhelming when you end up choosing two candidates and you puff up this moderate versus radical narrative. I mean, the point of an endorsement is to choose.
Yeah, otherwise
without that core
don't
element,
endorse.
you don't have an endorsement.
We're not endorsing here. We're just because it's a tough time choosing for a whole bunch of reasons. We're like, all right, so we're just not going to endorse. If you're going to do it, do it.
Putting aside even landing on two candidates, put aside them putting it on television, like a reality show, which doesn't actually bother me. I was really more struck by the tone of the op-ed, which had this real authoritative spirit to it. Like, here's the debate we've decided you should have.
Yeah.
We've chosen the debate that you should have. No, but the point I was going to make about that is what made me sad about it is it felt like it was from another era, because it felt like what they were doing was announcing something to the world, a quiet world where people would hear it but they're not. It just felt like they like all got together and like thought really, really hard about what they wanted to say, and then they went up to their podium and just shouted it at a hurricane.
It is a debate that reflects a narrative created by people like the New York Times editorial board and people who talk about politics, including us, a very insular group of political media people. That is the debate about the realist versus the radical model. It is not the debate. It does not reflect how voters are looking at this primary, which is what really made me annoyed. What were you just saying? You ask Biden's supporters, who's their second choice? Most of them say it's Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, his second choices are split between Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden. Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren have been trading supporters back and forth in this primary for the last several months.
But so, yeah, I mean, the thing is, though, yes, the fact that voters are ideologically hard to pin down, I think, is
and not just
true.
ideologically, because they do say it's not primarily ideological that there's a problem, because they said, most of their platforms substantively are the same. It's this sort of view of the world that, like, do we just need to return to a time before Donald Trump, or do we need fundamental change? Which, again, most voters would tell you both.
Well, but this is the point that I don't even need to, like, I can even take them on their terms. It's a little bit like, we've looked at all the candidates, and we really, really appreciate one candidate's, let me say it like this. One candidate has identified the enormity of the problems. However, another candidate refuses to do so in the solutions.
Yeah, it ends up hitting both of them.
Yeah,
which is also a problem.
It's so, like, I just want to understand what the takeaway from the New York Times is. It's that they agree with the Elizabeth Warren critique as to about the scale of the challenges we face, but they view as radical solutions that would meet those challenges. So it's like, the radical approach is to correctly identify the problems and say what you think you should do to address those problems. The realist approach is to look at our problems despite their grand scale and not address them fully. That's realist.
In one part of the op-ed, when they're talking about Bernie Sanders, they talk about how they do not favor his Medicare for all idea for healthcare because they don't agree with that policy. later in the same op-ed, when they talk about Joe Biden, they say that he only tinkers around the edges when it comes to healthcare.
Which was purely that made me so angry. It made me so angry because it was like, so did you Google it? Because like, yeah, I get that that's the slam on Joe Biden, and you can be for Medicare for all ahead of a public option. But the idea that like a public option from Joe Biden is tinkering, from Pete Buttigieg it's more, from Klobuchar it's more, from Warren it's even more. Like, it was a pure aesthetic judgment.
This is petty. Editorials are written in like this sort of definitive, authoritative way, right? And they can be a touch haughty. I would say this was no exception.
For sure.
My favorite part is they did little paragraphs for all like the also-rans who didn't get it. For Mayor Pete, they wrote, "His showing in the lead up to the primaries predicts a bright political future. We look forward to him working his way up."
I know.
That is the most condescending fucking bullshit in a condescending process where some journalist asked you like antagonizing questions. Like, it's good that they did it, like, fine, but you don't have to be that annoying.
I will say,
we hope Yang gets involved in New York politics.
What was that? What's happening? Does he want to do that?
I do think.
Did you ask him?
Since everyone's had one nice thing about this whole episode, I thought the candidates themselves in the interview, since I did watch this show, were maybe made the best case for themselves that I've seen, like better than the debate stage and better than their stump speeches. Like, I thought Joe Biden was sharp. I thought Bernie Sanders was like, came across like warm. And he also said this thing about like, yeah, I don't say happy birthday to people. I don't do bullshit well. It's fine. Pete Buttigieg showed a flash of anger when, he was accused of price fixing. Amy Klobuchar laid out a good case for electability. Elizabeth Warren was great in how she would deal with Mitch McConnell in the Senate. Like, they were all real. Cory Booker made me cry with the story he told at the end of when they asked him who broke his heart. It was, the candidates were really good. I do think talking about now the candidates that they picked, Warren and Klobuchar, Brian Beutler was sort of making the case for why this might have been okay. And he said, look, I think what they decided to do was they know that this could come down to a race between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. In fact, maybe that's most likely if you really squint at the polling right now. And what they wanted to say is if it's going to be a race between Biden, the more center-left guy, and Bernie, the lefty guy, we think it should be these two women instead who better represent those philosophies. I think Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar do represent those philosophies very well.
I actually do, like, jokes aside, like, I do appreciate that. I will, like, the second I saw it, I thought, well, in a field this big, choosing one candidate is not a rebuke to any other, but choosing two was. And I actually felt, my first reaction was to think this is about Joe Biden more than it even was about Bernie Sanders. It is not
surprising. Well, they were very dismissive of Bernie Sanders.
Yes,
I would say.
That's the thing is it's not surprising that the New York Times editorial board is not favorable to Bernie Sanders. It's just that's not their vibe. That's not their speed. That wasn't surprising to me. So the fact that they wouldn't endorse Bernie, I think, is an expected result. It was less expected to see them come up with a convoluted way to say, please don't vote for Joe Biden.
Well, and the irony there is the video that went viral from that show was at the very end when Joe Biden's in this elevator with this, security guard, working class African-American woman who just gushes about how much she loves him. And it has like 6 times the number of views as any other clip from the entire show.
I'll be honest. Look, a little of my reaction to this whole process is lingering rage from the 2008 primary process when the Times was equally condescending to Barack Obama.
They were.
Saying things like, but we need more specifics to go with his amorphous promise. I was like, fuck off.
But again, though, it's the same problem. Like, that's not true. That's the narrative. Like, that was an incredibly, I don't remember exactly when the full rollout of all the policies were, but I feel as though by the time the endorsement came,
totally.
we were in the heat of, like, these were two extremely strong policy shops.
Who did they endorse then? I don't even remember.
Hillary.
Oh, they did?
They always endorse
Hillary, then Obama.
Shows you how much this matters.
Against the game.
And it also just, it does, like, I feel like we're focusing on this and, like, we're being, like, the place of an endorsement in 2020 is like hard to really understand. And like the one thing I will say is that like it's also worth remembering too that like these are a group of people who took a task of endorsing someone really, really seriously, and
they did.
And like and it's as much as we can make fun of the outcome, and I want to, and I have. It's the end. But no, but
story in 3 acts.
I was honestly, my overall reaction to it was one of just sort of sadness at the fact that so much of our politics now are the serious people getting together and just really, really trying to show you that being serious is still cool and still counts and makes a difference. And then they it just comes apart on takeoff.
Take the work seriously. Just don't take yourselves quite so
That's right.
seriously.
That's
That
right.
would be my note.
And look, Amy Klobuchar is happier about her Quad City Times endorsement than her New York Times
No
endorsement.
shit, man.
Probably,
She knows how to tweet.
Probably
Listen,
matters more.
I would rather have like a really hardworking like Iowa state senator or rep than the New York Times. That said, in 2008, I nearly cried when the Des Moines Register endorsed Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama was like, "Hey, man, it's okay. Like we're gonna make it."
We're going to win.
I was like, "No,
And we did.
no, we're not."
All right. When we come back, Tommy talks to Chris Liddell Westefeld about his oral history of the 2008 Obama campaign.